Estamos muy contentos y con el lanzamiento hoy día del producto del cuento calendario. Es un aporte de la Universidad de la región, de la Universidad Estatal de O'Higgins, al desarrollo de la ciencia.
Para nosotros es un orgullo, es algo trascendental, porque no es un trabajo de ayer, es un trabajo que se viene realizando de hace 10 años y por lo tanto el resultado y de continuar trabajando, incentivando a los niños y niñas en el área científica, creo que es sumamente importante y por sobre todo estas alianzas interinstitucionales, con Explora, la verdad es que releva, por cierto, la educación inicial y los aprendizajes de nuestros niños y niñas.
Ustedes pueden ver de que los niños están muy motivados, tienen esa cara de asombro, de emoción, y hacer esta inauguración del cuento para nosotros ha sido bastante importante, junto con los papás acá, de poder armar esta feria junto con este gran evento que nos va a servir bastante para los educadores, este cuento del cambio climático.
Lo tratamos de hacer de una manera lúdica, entretenida, a través de un cuento calendario, de tal manera de que ellos puedan interactuar tanto en la historia o con la historia, pero también llevando la cuenta diaria de los fenómenos, ¿cierto? Cosas que pasan en la temporada de invierno, cosas que pasan en la temporada de verano, y que ellos vayan asociando eso tanto con el fenómeno temporal, como la lluvia, por ejemplo, como con el fenómeno temporal cronológico, que es el calendario.
Las jornadas de investigación en estudios de género que estamos desarrollando hoy, miércoles 9 de noviembre, en la Universidad de O'Higgins, suponen un hito para el Laboratorio Regional de Estudios de Género en términos de investigación. Nosotros, como parte de los objetivos del laboratorio, definimos nuestras acciones en torno a 4 ejes: investigación, vinculación con el medio, también las acciones de tipo artístico y docencia. Hoy teníamos esta primera oportunidad de mostrar la investigación que se está haciendo desde regiones o bien desde fuera de la región, pero con un enfoque regional. Encontramos que ha sido un éxito, tenemos asistencia tanto desde la propia universidad y presentaciones de académicas, también de docentes, de las distintas escuelas y de los institutos de investigación. Tenemos también la participación de estudiantes, no solo de nuestra universidad, sino también de otras, también investigadores de otras universidades, de colectivos de la sociedad civil y también desde instituciones públicas. En ese sentido, creemos que el desafío de aunar investigación, divulgación y vinculación con el medio se ha cumplido muy satisfactoriamente. La elaboración de esta jornada surge desde el interés en el laboratorio de promover la investigación colaborativa en temas de género y supone más que nada una excusa para encontrarnos y poder profundizar en la conversación que ojalá en un futuro nos permita avanzar en una investigación, como digo, de tipo colectiva.
Hoy estamos en Pichilemu, tenemos una gran cantidad de actividades buscando celebrar la ciencia de manera lúdica, cercana a la familia. Queremos llevar la ciencia a toda la comunidad, a todo el territorio y también a todas las edades, desde los niños pequeños hasta los abuelos, toda la familia, de manera entretenida.
Muy bueno, para nosotros, sobre todo que siempre somos comunas que quedamos un poco más distantes de Rancagua mismo, por ejemplo. Para nosotros es mucho más fácil acercarnos ahora a este tipo de instancias. Por la distancia misma, pero yo encuentro que es buenísimo que finalmente nos consideren un poco a todos en este tipo de iniciativas.
Bastante entretenido, una experiencia que sin duda me gustaría volver a experimentar, y los proyectos que tienen son bastante innovadores y interesantes. En sí está todo muy interesante y entretenido también.
Poder tener este tipo de ferias de la ciencia asociados, ¿cierto? En este caso la Universidad de O'Higgins, creo que viene a incentivar y a motivar a los niños respecto del real sentido del cuidado del medio ambiente. Por lo mismo, como digo, feliz de estar acá, agradecer la presencia del equipo para Explora y por supuesto de todos los niños y las distintas organizaciones que están hoy presentes, pudiendo demostrar su trabajo y también aportando a la comunidad.
Algunos de los stands que están presentando hoy incluyen las mismas investigaciones realizadas durante el año por niños de distintas escuelas en sus academias científicas.
Una muy buena experiencia, por primera vez que estoy en este tipo de instancias. Es más bien una experiencia más bien importante para los estudiantes, lo veo yo, pensando en que para ellos ver el trabajo de otros estudiantes también les abre un mundo a lo que es la ciencia como tal, que a veces cuesta un poco acercarlo a la ciencia en el fondo.
El día de hoy hemos venido a hacer una visita al Parque por la Paz, Villa Grimaldi, con un grupo de la comunidad universitaria de la Universidad de O'Higgins y de la mesa de trabajo por el memorial de la región de O'Higgins también. Esta iniciativa se enmarca dentro de la conmemoración del Día de los Derechos Humanos. Estamos conmemorando este día a través de una actividad formativa, formación en derechos humanos para nuestra comunidad, pero también a través de una experiencia que estamos viviendo, recorriendo este hermoso parque y emotivo parque que recuerda las violaciones de los derechos humanos cometidas por la dictadura cívico-militar en nuestro país, también con miras hacia el futuro, con miras hacia el aprendizaje de nuestra sociedad para no repetir esos hechos tan violentos.
Bueno, como funcionaria y docente de la Universidad de O'Higgins, quiero darle las gracias a la Dirección de Cultura, Patrimonio y Extensión por haber facilitado esta oportunidad de aprendizaje, ¿verdad?, de reencuentro con la memoria, así como relevar la importancia que tienen estos sitios de memoria para el encuentro, la comprensión en torno a los sucesos históricos que hemos atravesado como país.
También estamos presentes los miembros de la mesa, sitios de conciencia y memorias para el Nunca Más de la región de O'Higgins, un proyecto que busca levantar un memorial para la región y por eso estamos acá también aprendiendo de esta experiencia, de este primer sitio, el Parque por la Paz, Villa Grimaldi, el primer sitio a nivel latinoamericano. Tiene una larga experiencia y una trayectoria que ha ido también traspasando a otros sitios a nivel nacional y esperamos que también haga lo mismo con nosotros.
En lo que respecta a la región de O'Higgins, el sitio de conciencia que se está impulsando en conjunto con la Universidad de O'Higgins es algo que hemos valorado especialmente. Tanto es así que estuvimos hace no mucho tiempo de visita por allá y estamos atentos a cuánto avance pueda existir en la materia. Por supuesto, vamos a seguir acompañando esta iniciativa que, entre otras, muchas, surge desde la sociedad civil, la directamente agraviada, pero que en este caso además ha tenido el eco y la acogida virtuosa de la academia representada en la Universidad de O'Higgins.
Hoy día nos encontramos cerrando un año de proyecto en conjunto con la red de muralismo y arte público. Con ellos hemos trabajado todo este año y pretendemos seguir haciéndolo en el año siguiente. Hemos desarrollado diferentes actividades durante el año, desde encuentros virtuales hasta encuentros presenciales en las 3 provincias de la región.
Este primer año lo que se intentó fue identificar primero la gente que está haciendo un trabajo de arte público en la región. Desde ahí se levantaron distintos conversatorios en distintas comunas y en las distintas provincias. O sea, en las 3 provincias de la región se hizo un conversatorio. A partir de esos conversatorios se hicieron unos registros serigráficos, seriados, firmados, originales por los artistas, que eso es lo que está expuesto acá adentro en la sala de exposición. Luego de los conversatorios se dio inicio a un taller de grafiado en el cual invitamos a un maestro argentino, que es el maestro en la técnica. El objetivo es descentralizar el arte y la cultura, llevarlo a lugares donde en realidad estas experiencias no suceden.
A mi entender es fundamental lo que está haciendo la Universidad de O'Higgins. No hay espacios culturales, ¿no es cierto?, muy formales en Rancagua, y así como lo dije en alguna otra ocasión, me parece que la universidad, ¿no es cierto?, tiene la obligación de generar estos espacios.
Bueno, hoy estoy muy contenta de estar acompañando este proceso que está realizando la Universidad de O'Higgins con la red de muralistas y arte público, un proceso que han llevado todo un tiempo y que han ido fortaleciendo un trabajo colectivo. Y en ese sentido nosotros como Seminario de las Culturas, las Artes y el Patrimonio, que también estamos en un trabajo de asociatividad y de convenio con la Universidad de O'Higgins para ir fortaleciendo espacios formativos en las artes en la región y de acciones concretas en el territorio. Estamos muy contentos también de poder aportar un granito de arena en el sentido de abrir todas las herramientas que tiene el Ministerio de las Culturas, las Artes y el Patrimonio para que este tipo de trabajo en red pueda tener más acceso a herramientas, a programas, a proyectos como pueden ser los puntos de cultura u otras acciones que se vienen en el 2023 y para adelante como parte de las iniciativas de nuestro gobierno.
Si bien en este Festival de la Ciencia las temáticas principales han sido agua y cambio climático, donde los institutos de ingeniería y de ciencias agroalimentarias participan activamente, es una actividad que es abierta a toda la investigación que se está realizando en la universidad, por lo tanto también hay muchos académicos y académicas que hoy día hemos visto que están participando, que han traído con sus familias y que también han sido parte de las actividades.
Muy entretenida, los monitores súper claros y claras, explicando y con harto entusiasmo, ver cómo los niños y las niñas se entusiasmaban con la robótica, con el globo meteorológico, acá con la astronomía también, entonces ha sido una excelente jornada y ojalá que podamos repetir este tipo de iniciativa.
Vi a algunos robots que estaban por allá, vi por primera vez una impresora 3D, vi piedras, una reacción química en piedras que no sabía que existía.
Me parece que es una tremenda oportunidad de poder mostrarles que hay cosas muy interesantes como la robótica, por ejemplo, que están muy en boga y que ese tiempo que destinan para cosas inservibles lo pueden utilizar para aprender cosas positivas.
Nosotros como Festival de la Ciencia buscamos llegar a todo público, vemos familias desde niños pequeñitos hasta abuelos disfrutando de la ciencia, todas las edades lo han pasado muy bien, con actividades de distintos ámbitos y buscamos que esta ciencia llegue a la familia, a todo el público de manera lúdica, divertida y muy contentos porque hay mucho público y todos se ven muy felices.
Thank you so much for waiting, for being here, for those who are here and for those who are in the YouTube as well. We are about to begin our session today, which is called Trust, Compassion, and Positive Leadership in Uncertain Times. Here we have our great experts on topics of leadership. Kathryn Riley is here with us, Professor Karen Seashore Louis. And so today it's going to be around 1 hour of presentations, discussions. There's time for your questions as well. So for those who are in the YouTube channel, please let your questions there so we can post them at the end. I'm going to briefly introduce our presenters. So Kathryn Riley, she's Professor of Urban Education at University College London, and she's an international scholar whose work bridges policy and practice. Her work has included teaching in schools and working with the World Bank to develop its leadership program for national leaders. Professor Riley's research on place and belonging addresses concerns about the influence of global and extreme events on young people's lives and has largely been undertaken in schools in ethnically and socioeconomically deprived neighborhoods. She's the author of several papers and books. This includes Place and Belonging and School Leadership, Researching to Make a Difference. And recently she published Compassionate Leadership for School Belonging. This was just 2022, and it's a book that is available online. Dr. Karen Seashore Louis is a Regents Professor Emerita and Beck Chair of Ideas in Education at University of Minnesota. Her research centers on school improvement and reform, school effectiveness, leadership in school settings, and the politics of knowledge use in education. Her current projects include research-practice collaboration and the application of positive psychology to larger social settings. Also, several papers, books, which I'm not going to number here, but she's the author of books such as Positive School Leadership, Building Capacity and Strengthening Relationships, and Caring School Leadership. I really appreciate your time being here. I know you are really busy academics, so it's a great honor to have you here. We also have Daniela Figueroa, who is going to comment on the presentations today. She's an academic at Universidad Finisterra, at the Faculty of Education, Family and Policy. What's the whole name? Psychology and Family. Yes. So thank you very much for being here, and we will open this seminar with Kathryn Riley. Thank you, Kathryn.
Thank you. First of all, just to say how pleased I am to be here, and then I'm seeing, my mother was a primary school teacher, and she would say if you made a mistake on the board, it was to see if people were paying attention. And I realized, because I did this yesterday, that I've lost, she's Karen Seashore Louis. So any of the mistakes, it's to see if you are attending to what I'm saying. So I begin by saying Feliz Año Nuevo to everybody. And obviously, everybody who might see this recording on another occasion. I am really pleased to be here again in Chile. And I have many Chile connections, I should say, that this wonderful person here that you have, we worked co-research together for 2 or 3 years during COVID, pretty challenging. And this wonderful person here has been a student of mine and has just submitted her PhD for examination. So that's quite an achievement. And so what Karen and I wanted to do was to give you some perspectives, ways of looking, ways of seeing. So imagine you're going to put on los gafas, your glasses, and you're putting on your Chilean glasses and you're saying, okay, when I think about trust, when I think about compassion and leadership, and I put mis gafas Chilean on, what do I see? So we don't know, we can only guess, but we hope that that's what we will do together to help you see things in a different way, and we want to really learn from you. So very, very pleased to be here. But first of all, a very simple thing, which is we're just going to go around and ask you one word, una pregunta, or 2, 3 at the most. Why are you here today? Here you are, almost starting your holidays. Something must have brought you here. Okay, so I'm going to start. Well, I know why Karen's here, because we're presenting. So dime tell me llamas, and then tell me your name, and then why you're here. 1 word, 2 words, English or Spanish?
No, I'm a student. I'm a student of English pedagogy here
Okay.
at the university.
Yeah.
I'm already in 5th year.
Okay, but why today? Have you come, this beautiful sunshine, to hear? What brings you here today?
Because I'm very interested in the topic.
Okay.
Trust, compassion, leadership,
Okay.
education.
Something touched you there. Okay, so welcome to you.
Thank you.
Okay, and why? ¿Por qué? Why? The why question. Why did you come? You had nothing else to do on this beautiful day. I'm making a joke. Why did you come? What was your motivation? En español. No hay problema en inglés o en español. En español. Okay. Okay. These issues, the importance are very similar in a way. Hi, welcome to you. Why are you here?
Because I would like to be a positive leader.
I think that's a pretty good reason for coming. Okay. Right.
My name is Juliana. I'm a postdoc of Instituto, Ciencias,
Yeah.
and I'm going to start to teach. So I want to have more herramientas
Okay.
and be a good teacher.
Excellent. Thank you. Hi, welcome.
¿Can I speak in Spanish?
Yes. Yes.
Yo soy del Instituto de Ciencias Sociales, soy
Sí.
abogado, Luis.
Sí.
Y creo que es súper importante en
Sí.
estos momentos complejos, convulsos
Sí.
sociales
Yeah.
derivados de la pandemia,
Sí.
saber cómo poder llegar a los
Sí.
estudiantes, no solamente desde un punto de vista de ser docente de educación,
Yeah.
sino docente de cualquier área.
Yeah.
En este caso, docentes de derecho
Yeah.
que puedan dar una visualización
Yeah.
de lo que es la sociedad
Yeah.
actual y sus desafíos.
I think for all of us, if we as educators don't stop now and say, what are we doing in the light of COVID, then who are we as educators? This is the time to stop and ask those questions. Absolutely, absolutamente. Yes. Hi.
I'm Ricardo. I'm also a postdoc here in the
Yeah.
Instituto
Yeah.
de Ciencias, and I'm here to learn about the education in general.
Okay.
Because I have to teach as well this next semester, so I'm trying to learn everything I can about.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Camila.
Hi,
I work
Camila.
here. My main motivation actually is my niece.
Mm-hmm.
She is 5, so I think it's very important, the education.
Absolutely.
And one of the problems that we have was about COVID.
Yeah.
So actually for me it's very important
Yes.
to be a very positive leader for her.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I connect with that. And I'm going to ask you the same, Manuel. You're here because we're here, but why else are you here?
Because I organized this. No, because it's a really relevant topic. I think it's a great privilege to have you here in Chile and to have the opportunity to learn from your experience working on issues on trust and compassion in schools, which are, I think, are crucial given the context of the pandemic as well.
Absolutely.
Particularly.
Yeah. Dani.
Hello, I'm Daniela. I'm here because I have the honor to comment on your session, but also because it's of my interest as well. I think, leadership is key, has been key for many years in education, in early childhood education as well, which is my background. But now, within this context of complexities and things we don't know, think of trust, compassion, and positive leadership is something that I'm really interested about to know a little bit more.
Yes, well, welcome to everybody. So I'm going to make a presentation about 12, 30 minutes, between 10 and 15 minutes. And Manuela will let me know when I've had my time, because I could talk forever on these subjects. So I called mine, what's your model of leadership and does it matter? Because I think it's exactly the point. Does it matter? I often say to my students, when they're coming in their masters, and Daniela probably remember this, and I say, what kind of leader do you want to be? And they look at me and go, you mean I have a choice? You do have a choice. And I think that is really important wherever you are. The choices will be different here in Chile, but you still have choices about how you lead. And I also set up an organization with my late partner called the Art of Possibilities. So you can see in my mind, I have all this sense of possible things. And I'm going to start my story maybe with some of the hard stuff, the COVID stuff, but we end on a positive note. I just want you to know there's a happy ending so that I don't want to spoil the whole thing. In practical terms, I've written a paper about some of these issues, and Manuela has it. I don't know if you circulated it, but I know she has I was trying to think these issues. You're very welcome to read that. I'll give you other links as we go through. So this is my story, and it's leading through this labyrinth. Leadership is such a complex. Is this a dead end? Is this the way to go? Things that people have to see. So I've got 3 parts. Well, the first one is what I call riding the COVID wobble board. You know, to wobble board, you're balancing on this board. And that's really what it's been like for lots of leaders. And we think things were tough, but actually what I'm going to suggest to you, they're even tougher now for different kinds of reasons. But then I'm going to move into the possibilities, which is all about compassion, and how different forms of leadership have the possibilities of creating different ways of working in schools and different sense of opportunities. So here we are. You will recognize all of this. The way, I think with COVID, it's the way it suddenly hit us. And I was talking at dinner last night, and another student of mine who got on the last plane from Chile to Europe as COVID came in. So there's this drama for all of us, and the sad stories and so on. And so what happened was that Manuela and I were already working with some municipalities. And then COVID came, and we said, you've got to do something different. And we put together a project in a matter of a couple of weeks. And this project brought together 16 head teachers from different localities. And it was unusual in many ways. It was unusual because it was both a piece of research, but also it was a place where these school leaders could share things. So we were doing both things, and we had 3 groups of school principals. So we were trying to track their journey. We were trying to understand it. But there was this wonderful thing about how connections and alliances built because they were together. And so this is in my book, which you can download for free. So you can get this free from UCL Press. So I shall share this for the YouTubers, free, no cost. UCL actually give you something for free, which is really rather nice. And it's very, so if you can just pass those along, Daniel, will you? So we reported it there. So here we are. So this is the story. So you have, I can do the hard bits first. So you have just to say that the English school system was schools were partially open and children were going in who had special educational needs or whose parents were frontline, they were working in the hospitals and so on. But most children were at home, okay? And it all happened so quickly. So first of all, the loss of the school community. And then some COVID happened quite quickly in the UK in terms of deaths and so on. And one of our school localities was in a part of London with a large number of black and ethnic minority people. And the schools, a couple of schools we were working with had some of the highest death rates in the locality. So I'm just giving you the context. Very different, but that was one extreme. So the sense of dread, of fear, all of that negative, too much stuff, juggling all the time, and the education direction from our government was, they were, the nicest thing our heads could say about it was unhelpful. They had many other things to say. I mean, it was priorities changing overnight. They got good support from their municipalities, but government was all over the place. And as they said, it was a leaderless climate. However, there was this other side of it where incredible connections with community, acts of such love and compassion, student to student, family, teacher, and this was the life that they were seeing. And they began to see their role in a different kind of way. And I'm looking at you, Manuela, when we begin to talk about compassion, they're going, yeah, compassion. Starting about being compassionate to themselves. I can't do it all. I don't know it all. I have to do it with other people. And that began to emerge. So this is the kind of dialogue that we got in with them over this period of time. But, you know, incredibly challenging, unclear. Nobody knew what was going to happen. So partway through, sort of roughly a year into COVID, we were then reviewing where they were. So schools were about to go back. Okay, this is the period. So it's like we're taking their pulse. How are you now? How would you feel? What's happening? And what you see in this image is I love this concept of liminality. So you're in a liminal space. Liminality is the notion of you're like in between things. You don't quite know where you are. It's a place of incredible uncertainty. You know, these leaders had, you know, they'd done endurance, they'd done courage, they'd done compassion, but they're going, wow, what next? And they were saying, we've just run and run and run. And we're saying to them, we know you finished that sprint, but there's a marathon ahead. And they're going, wow, we're too exhausted. We are too exhausted. We have learned so many things during COVID, but we've not really been able to share the learning. So the interesting thing for them is, and I think from conversations I've had over the last week or so, for many leaders, is what next? Okay, how do you go? Where do you step? Do you step backwards, and is it more about regulations and control, or do you step forward? Is it more about relations and compassion? And I think you'll find in many, many places that is an issue. Meanwhile, we've got here, when the going gets tough, so here we are now, wow, okay? COVID sort of managed in many countries, not all of them, but if you then take stock, you have to look at young people's experience of school. And a lot of my work has been on schools. Are schools places of belonging? Do children and young people feel they belong? But the reality is that for many, many children and young people, schools are not places of belonging, not places that they feel they belong. Here in Chile, you might be in a school where the examination results are dropping and you're worrying if the school will still be open in a year's time. You don't feel that you belong there. But also, what's happening is that particular groups of children and young people are affected by things, and particularly by the impact of COVID. So you have got, certainly in the UK, families, poorer families, refugee families, really feeling the impact of COVID. So my in-between bit here is that we have to look at things afresh. For me, I would say I would be looking at schools through the lens of belonging. Do the children and young people feel they belong? Do the adults, do the staff feel they belong? Do the families feel attended to? And if we are going to move in any way forward, we have to think about those kinds of issues. So this is my interregnum. I've written a lot about these issues. There's a lot in the book. I'm not going to talk about the detail of that now because I want to move on. I have about 10 minutes? Yeah, okay, thought that was it. Now, but yet what we know is that a sense of belonging, this is one of the schools. I should have put the picture. Actually, there was a brilliant picture of you and I in that school. I should have put that up, shouldn't I? You know, that the evidence is when young people feel they belong, not only they feel good, do you know what? They get better exam results. Do you know what? Their teachers feel happier, feel more professionally rewarded. So if we know that, and as we know the data on belonging, then the question is, what do you do about it? And what kinds of leaders and leadership are going to take us forward? You know, I like that, you know, the terrifying leader or the one who is really listening to you and compassionate. So a lot, what I am seeing in the UK is that people are moving to one extreme. So a lot of the heads that Manuela and I work with are really moving into that compassionate mode. But there's a lot of people really terrified, and they've gone into what I call command and control, rules, regulation. We won't do things differently. And there's almost more of a divide emerging. But what I have been looking at in my research and is very much the thing about how do you create that sense of belonging? Schools don't become places of belonging by accident. It is a huge amount to do with the leadership, because the leadership sets the tone of possibilities of how you walk and talk and how you interact with staff, with young people, and with communities. And the research that I'm kind of getting into, or what I'm looking at, is just also looking at compassion, looking at, you know, the neuroscience tells us we're hardwired for compassion. We feel kind of quite good about it if we're compassionate. But also looking at the things that bind us together and make connections. So if I'm thinking about leadership, you know, what is it, you know, what makes a leader, how do you act if you're a compassionate leader? How do you bring people together? And that little block there, compassionate leaders attend, understand, empathize, and help. That frame comes from research from our health service, who've done a lot on compassionate leadership. They've learned a lot about compassionate leadership during COVID. So it's thinking about, in the context of Chile, what is it? How can people step into a different space, despite the funding problems, despite the structural problems? What is it that can be done? And, you know, just to sort of almost finish off here, you know, what gets in the way? What are the barriers? And this is a lovely thing, this is from the health thing, you know, it's those things of routine, pressures, overload. You know, people, when they're feeling pressurized, just getting, we're not going to change the rules because at least we know what to do. Or if we change the rules and the district people come in and look at us, we're in trouble. So it's an attitude of mind, and I think it's about thinking about what's getting in the way, but also looking at, you know, at the evidence, which is compassionate cultures are actually nurtured by compassionate leaders. And so I think it's really important to be thinking about these issues. And then this is my last thing. I love this image. It's one of my favorite. You know, you see from, I've got a copy of the book because I'm going to give this to Daniela later on. So you can have a look at you pass that and you can look at some of the pictures. And I love this one. I love this picture. because this little girl is here, and it's the way her hands, you know, I belong here, and you can see. So thinking about your niece, you know, that's what you want, don't you? You want your, you know, to that little energy, bundle of love and energy to look at the school, and this is the way that you can walk into it. And so this is really why I'm focusing on this and the evidence that these forms of leadership, how do you create belonging? It is through compassion, it is building communities, and it is building connections. And so I'm interested to know from you how that links to what you're doing here in Chile. And just to say, that's the Art of Possibilities website, and you can find lots of stuff, the paper that I wrote here, and a whole series of podcasts. And we're going to play you a rap from one of the podcasts in a few minutes. And Manuela was my co-person on that as well. They are really cool, the raps actually, particularly. So I'm saying to you to think about, in your thinking and responding to both Karen and I, you know, well, thinking about Chile, wow, okay, the complexes. I don't know a lot, but I know a fair bit. You read people's research, you know, we've been here quite a number of times. What enables compassion? What gets in the way? How can you do this stuff? What are the possible triggers that will lead things in that way? And really, you know, how do you see the story? You know, what I'm saying, how does that compare to Chile? So I'm going to hand over to Karen now to talk about some of these from a slightly different perspective.
Okay, yes. Is it working? Okay, great. Kathryn and I are, over the last 25 years, have been bonded at the hip. But we start from very different perspectives. Kathryn invariably starts from thinking about the student and their experience. And I'm an organizational sociologist, so I always start thinking about what's the school like, and then how will that affect the student's experience. So they all come together at the same place, but I'm going to tell you a slightly different story because I can only tell you mine, right? So I am going to ground my comments in the US perspective, and I'm particularly interested in how that reflects what's happening in Chile. Like Kathryn, I've had Chilean students. I actually have 2 articles written in Spanish, which is obviously I did not write. Jose Weinstein had them translated. So if you want to read about positive school leadership in Spanish, it's available. But the US, I want to start with the US because people think that the US is a country, which it is for many things. But for schools, it is not. The Constitution of the United States delegates the responsibility for education to the states. So the states have almost complete autonomy to do what they want. Now, the government provides about 5% of the funding for education through various incentive programs. And so they have a lever that says, if you don't do it the way we'd like you to, well, we won't give you that 5%. So there's some leverage, but imagine if it's only 5% and you hate it. So I'm going to give you an example of how different things can be, just very quickly so that you understand. I am, whoop, that's not working. That's all right. I have lived almost all my life in a state that borders Canada. So we're more like Canada than we are like Texas. Texas, I would say it would be easier for me to move here than it would be for me to move to Texas, culturally. Texas has a very centralized system. The State Department decides everything, and they tell teachers what to do, and they tell school principals what to do. In all the states I've lived in, the state says, well, we think local people really know what's best. And so we'll make sure that everybody's got enough money, but then you decide how to use it. So I'm going to tell you the story more of that because that actually is more common in the US than others. Now, one of the things that happened during COVID, which is really important, I want to just be very quickly. These are 3 very important consequences, and they're very similar to what happened in England, although they express themselves differently. So our schools were closed completely for a little longer than Chile's. What happened as a consequence is parents became closer to their children because they had to become more engaged in the educational enterprise. So we have the positive outcome is that families feel closer now than they did before COVID. But because states often, like the ones I lived in, said, oh, we're not quite sure what to do. We are being asked to make policies governing all schools, and we've always told you you should do it the way you want to. Things, you know, they'd open, they'd close, they'd masks, no masks. And they were so variable and erratic that most school districts decided they had to manage it on their own. They could get no consistent help from the state, much less the federal government, which said nothing. Now, one of the happened is that parents, in the end, became very anxious. Things changed so rapidly for them that they became very anxious, and what they said is, we need more control. We're tired of having people tell us how to do it. We own this school because it's a local school, and we want you to do what we want you to do. So lots of politics, much more, I think, than in England, which has a longer tradition of centralized policy enactment. Okay, I'm just looking at Chile. Chile, the school closings are absolutely in the middle of the OECD. So they were actually slightly longer closings than for the average school, but we have some very strong outliers. And in New Zealand, they didn't close at all. In Sweden, they didn't close at all. The United States isn't in there. The United States isn't in there because you can't calculate it, because there were 50 different responses. Okay, so, and England isn't in there because England didn't close at all. And some
it's there.
It's there? Is it in? Okay, it's in there. But it's only for some schools, and it doesn't reflect the fact that schools actually didn't close completely. The teachers were always there. So very different context. And so this created an enormous challenge for school leaders, enormous, because all of a sudden they had to pay even more attention than they used to the families. And there was an enormous amount of distress on the part of school leaders and teachers because they could see what was happening in families. Teachers were on Zoom, and they could see that many of their children had no place to work and even be on Zoom because the only place where they could do it was in the kitchen and their mother is cooking at the same time. Or they could see, so there's, all of a sudden, there's almost too much awareness of what's going on outside of the school rather than inside of the school. So I think this presents a long-term challenge because people don't forget that. It's a long-term challenge that many school leaders are facing and many communities are facing. How do we need to change in our relationship between our communities and our families? So that's an organizational challenge. It's not just a challenge for individuals. So, all right, so we have the good and the bad and the really ugly. And I'm just going to say this is very blunt. Parents and children, we have a better relationship. I spend more time with my children. Lots of inequity. Like Chile, there are many, many very rural schools in the United States. In some of them, bad internet, the children didn't have computers. Teachers would be driving to everybody's house to drop off work at the door because they couldn't talk to them. Not ideal. In a well-resourced urban school, every child has a laptop, every child has a place to study. But then there's anger anger in a lot of districts. Why is this happening to my family? Why is this happening to my school? You didn't manage it well. So not very much compassion outside the school for inside the school. I have a wonderful quote from one school leader who said, "It's gotten so polarized, I don't know how to work. I've gotten a twitch in my eye. It happens all the time. Every day, my eye starts to twitch, and I get a call from a parent, and I just feel like I can't go on." So students are hurting. Mental health issues are rampant in the United States. The data suggests that something like 25% of US students are suffering from depression or anxiety. Huge increase. So these are institutional problems at the local level. Social skills are terrible. I collect a lot of data from Twitter, and teachers are saying, I don't know what to do. I've always had the capacity to get my children to cooperate, maybe except one or two, and then you can pay attention to them. Now there's a whole classroom of students who don't even seem to know how to work together anymore. So there's enormous distress, and I think this is a collective problem. There's moral distress because people feel they haven't been able to meet the needs of the students, so they're just uncomfortable about what happened and what part they may have played in it. There are staffing shortages. Teachers are leaving. We are unable to find teacher assistants. We are unable to find teachers in some schools. There's huge pressure from, all of a sudden people said, schools, now that the schools are together, you need to make up for this learning loss. And the teachers are saying, how can I make up for learning loss when I have these depressed, anxious students who can't concentrate? And so that's where they are. I got this. This is actually a cartoon that a teacher posted on Twitter. So here's the dilemma organizationally. And I don't know what it's like in Chile. But public confidence in education, which we like to measure everything in the United States, public confidence in schools is the lowest it's ever been since they started to measure it 65, 70 years ago. There's bewilderment. Nobody really knows how to fix this. We don't know how to make up for learning loss. We don't have the resources to deal with the rampant mental health issues that students are displaying. How do you replace, if teachers are leaving because they're too tired and exhausted, it's not as if you can train a bunch of new teachers in 6 months. And here's the thing, everybody wants it to be certain. What we liked about school before was we could count on it. The children would get up, they would go to school. The teachers would get up, they would be in school. We can't count on it anymore, and so that's what we want. We just want some certainty. Normal. That's not a policy problem. No government can fix that problem. Which brings me back to the theme, which is this decentralization. It's now back down to the municipalities and the schools because they're the only ones who can see their way through this tremendous difficulty. How do school leaders respond? There are a number of ways in which we have seen them respond in the interviews that we've been doing. And I just want to talk a little bit about what an example is. Let's see, I didn't start my timer. Their institutional responses mean that school leaders have a little extra resources. So in one school, for example, they had sufficient money so that they could say, we're not going to hire this extra teacher assistant. We're going to hire somebody who can help, who really can serve as a conduit. We can talk, spends the time. Their job is to talk to the families, to bring them in when necessary, to communicate with them, and to make sure that you do everything to get the child back in school so that they don't just stop coming. So that's a kind of institutional response. We'll rearrange the time. We've got a little extra time. We'll have teachers meet once a week to talk about what they can do about student behavior. It's normal. That's what we usually do for problems. But it doesn't solve these big problems very well. A second response, the second response is a cultural response. And that is to say, we have to bring people together. We have to work with our community, work with our teachers to agree what's most important right now. And that could be different in a small rural community than it is in an area in a large city where the parents may be more diverse, they may have more different opinions. Yes, don't worry, I'm there almost. And then there are political responses. Enormously, and I had one school leader who said, I have to spend my time. I've been in this community. This is a superintendent for a small, medium-sized municipality. I've spent my time depositing goodwill in the bank with this community. I go to the meetings. They know me. I negotiate with them. Now I have to take it out. So it's a political sense of really negotiating different kinds of groups, working very hard to tamp down this intense dissatisfaction and fear and bewilderment. But then there's something else that's just a relational response, which is, I think, gets to where Kathryn and I really overlap. Because a relational response says, I need to work individually with so many people or small groups of people so that they understand what we are trying to do, that they understand and we agree that we trust each other to be doing the best we can under difficult circumstances. And what we've seen is very consistent with a much more theoretical perspective that I developed in this book, Positive School Leadership, where there's evidence from studies not just in schools but in every industry that good leaders, leaders who actually get good results in their organization, are ones that start by, I know you, I understand you. Yes, I remember your mother got sick last week. Is she doing better? So that people feel cared for in a personal way. If you don't start with that, the other responses, which are very important, aren't going to work very well. This is a real stretch for school leaders because they're not used to spending that much time doing that. That's not what they were prepared to do. They were prepared to observe classrooms or balance the budget for the municipality or run a school board meeting. So they're looking outward, not at individuals, but at collectives, at different interest groups. They have a different frame of mind. So, but if they have this understanding that I need to start with relationships, then they can do this other work, which will then lead them eventually to a more compassionate understanding of what needs to be done. So, one quick summary. What do positive leaders do? And we know quite a bit about this, extensive literature. The first is they have to behave the way they would like everyone to behave. So if they say you have to start with relationships, they have to ask their teachers something about them. They have to know their teachers personally. And they have to expect that their teachers will then know personally what's going on with each of their students. If that doesn't happen, if they don't do that, then teachers will think they're asking me to do it, but they don't do it themselves. They have to ask very authentically. If they say we start with compassion, people have to see compassion in everything that they do. So there has to be a very lots of school leaders say, our value is every student will learn. And then a student is told to leave the school because they behaved badly. And the teachers look at it, that student's not learning. He's out of school, or he's in the special room where we send students who misbehave. So how do you figure out how to manage in ways so that you can express, I don't know, but we're doing our best. Then you have to establish these values, and now you do that through routine behaviors. How do you, as a school leader, greet the students when they come into the school? Are you there? Do you talk to them personally? Can they see you expressing interest in their being in school? That's a very simple answer. You go into a school, it's really different when the leader is out there meeting the students in the morning or not. And you have to minimize control. Kathryn talked about that. The response could be, we'll go back to control because this student behavior is impossible and we have to have rules. Or you have to answer, say, why is that student misbehaving? What happened in his home that causes him to come in and behave in that way? So, and then finally, how do you do that? You don't get that information unless you have strong networks in your school, which cause other people to want to have strong networks with each other so that the information circulates. Otherwise, it gets stuck in pods. Some people know things, other people don't. We know that these lead to all sorts of positive outcomes for the school. So I think the big question, we're done, is this. What? Yeah. The big question is this one. I don't need to read it. How can you improve your relationship with this bewildered community in order to improve the school, which improves the experiences of students? That's it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So another part of the jigsaw, and just before we segue into Danielle and her response, I want to take you very specifically, your hearts and minds and thoughts, the children, young people, and who's particularly struggling post-COVID, you know. Karen, for example, talked about families being closer together, somewhere. In London, a massive increase in domestic abuse, women being made homeless, violence against children as well. So this is part of the reality. And the other thing is looking at both before COVID and during COVID, those groups were particularly struggling. And it's no doubt poor groups, certainly in the UK, and people have suggested to me here in Chile, refugee organisations. So what I'm going to just segue to before handing over to Danny is this. I mentioned the podcast that Manuela and I did. And in each podcast, we have a rap. And so a rapper, Jamie Pye, picked on a theme from all of these conversations with young people, education people all over the world, including here in Chile. And one of the conversations was between a colleague in Morocco, international educator, and a colleague in the UK who deals with young people refugees. And she told us that this is just before COVID. She'd gone into a school, and there was a girl whose family came from difficult circumstances as a refugee to the UK. And the only words that this girl could say in English after 6 weeks in school, so the bad education experience, were shut up and leave me alone. That was her education experience. So I'm just going to play you can get all this fantastic music, which should be, you could go to the next, where's that gone then?
You're going backwards.
No, but the forward isn't going to, here we go. So if I press against that, this is the run. It starts pre-care.
Yo, shut up and leave me alone. Don't let that be the only words that they know. Do they really mean leave me alone? Or really are they really alone? Look, do you feel connected, respected? Do you show love to the people that you step with? Do you feel accepted, protected? Feel like you belong, or do you feel like you're neglected? I think that we should all
So I wanted it. I mean, it is a great rap, isn't it? You can listen to it more. But the words that Jamie put together were all based on our interviews. So it's what's happening to young people. So imagine somebody comes here to Chile from a different country. Probably not quite the same because they're more likely to be Spanish speaking. But how are they going to respond? How are they welcome? Who feels the insider? Who feels they belong? And your thing to start with, why are we here today, is about thinking about these issues. But I wanted to entice you to then you will go to the wonderful podcast and hear more of the blogs, and I'll give you the link for that later. So I'm now handing over to Danny, having given you that one. But we just wanted you to hear it because I think it's such a powerful reminder to us of what we're doing and what we're about. So let me give you this one. I'll do it because, oh yeah. There we go.
All right. Does it work okay? I don't know. Right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for Kathryn, to Karen as well, for these two wonderful presentations. And I think they too make a lot of sense to us as well. We have not the same context. We are different in so many ways, but we can also find similarities in what happened here in Chile because of COVID. We also found these children being a part of the system. We have also so many vulnerable people living in Chile, and this segregation, these conditions just were so clear because of the pandemic. For example, access to internet and these online classes, and so many children just couldn't connect to classes or just tried to find ways. I remember seeing the news, for example, that some kids were to the roof of their houses just to get some access to Wi-Fi to be able to connect to the school. So it shows that we have difference inside the country, which is not new to us, but still we have also this lack of compassion and positive leadership, not because leaders don't want to be like that, but because the system gets just over it and doesn't allow them to be the way they want to be. I was super attentive to the presentation, so I found one mistake here. It says, Dr. Daniela, I hope to be a doctor in a couple of months. I still have to do my viva. But anyway, almost there, hopefully. Well, but the thing is that I was so attentive, and I listened to both presentations, obviously. But you were telling something that also happened here in Chile, that there are some places that are more free to have bottom-up approaches to leading and to run schools, but we have other places that are so top-down. And we teachers, and I'm a teacher myself, I'm a nursery teacher actually, early childhood educator. We are so mandated to do things, and that happened during the pandemic as well. The curriculum changed. Policy was quite erratic for us as well. They certainly tried to make responses, but they were just not clear, and we only were mandated to have priority contents to deliver. But we didn't have a real approach to how to deal with students' learning itself. And for example, at the nursery level, what happened was like, for example, babies between 1 and 2 have to connect to classes, and that was like, it doesn't make sense at all. But it was the only possibility that some nurseries have. And you say, okay, there are policymakers here. They should be thinking about this. and this is the only way that they can provide us, I don't know, any sort of help, and it just doesn't work in certain levels. For example, in primary or secondary schools, there was one policy that was deliver food for kids, because we have actually a policy from the HUNAEP to provide food for vulnerable children, socially vulnerable children. It was the duty of teachers, not the duty, but the duty of teachers and schools to deliver that boxes. Do you remember that we have boxes for families? So teachers had to be at the school in spite of their own circumstances, just to deliver these boxes. So the school transformed its ways of being just to connect with the community. And I think here comes the compassion that Kathryn was talking about. It's compassion in a way of caring. We need to care of each other, and I think that's key in the Chilean context, what you have brought from the US and the UK to this presentation and to people that is looking at by YouTube. We don't have this sense of compassion because it's kind of not leadership style, I would say, or maybe not a really valued style, because it shows you as someone soft. But it doesn't mean to be like that. It's just we are humans and we need to connect each other. This is our way of being. And just showing sympathy or being close to someone because I think it's gonna be better for the school is not really the way. I think it has to do with a real sense of compassion or being positive, of caring about others. And I just tried to make a response to your questions in one way. And I think, and then I would like the people here in the room to answer with me as well. I think a key aspect to build belonging, compassion, and positive leadership, it's about giving the space for teachers for having agency. So, and focus on the interest and needs of schools as spaces, as places. The interest of teachers themselves, because they know better than no one what the school needs, what children needs, what student needs, and the needs of the organization, the needs of the school, depending on the context, the place, etc. So if we have these two things in mind, we can build, I would say, not just positive, but trusty and real deep relationships that help to connect people and to have a certain, maybe we will have different paths, but we will have the same end. So we can't just walk through different roads, I would say, but then we can find a place where we all feel comfortable to be in, and I think that's so important. And teachers in this country are not being real listened to, so that's why I would like you that are here to raise your voices as well and say, what do you think that we can do to change the way we are leading schools and to move to this compassionate, positive way. So the word's open for you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So, is this working? No? Okay. Well, we can hear each other, I think. Can people on YouTube only through this?
Okay.
Okay, well. Because I would like to go deeper into what Daniela was saying and open the space for listening to your questions. I know it's almost 12:30, so I think we can take 5-10 minutes for this in case you have questions for Kathryn, Karen, Daniela, or just comments on the presentations. We have a few questions on YouTube, but I would like to open the space first for the people who are here. You can just speak out loud. We don't need to. Oh yeah, we can use this as well. Do you want to? I think there's another one. No?
No, it's that.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to comment. I did my first practicum in 2020, and I did it on a very vulnerable school in Matali. And in this school, the person in charge of Confianza escolar did this. I was able to see how he managed to help families, not just students. He talked with people, he called families, okay, how are you? How are you doing? Do you need something? And there were little problems like, okay, my refrigerator crashed, so I don't have a refrigerator and I need one because I need to eat somehow. And he managed to help them getting a refrigerator and send them the device to their houses. And so he started to build this sense of community, and they formed a plan for surviving this educational part of the pandemic during the 2020, which was like the harder part of the pandemic. So I'm inspired. I really liked your presentations, and I wanted to comment that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank all of you for your wonderful presentation and also the organization. Thank you. And I have one question, and it's about how to get a balance between the needs of compassion and belonging and the authority. I don't know if is there any limit that a leadership have to have? Because it's difficult when you are starting to be a teacher, and it's a problem for me. So is there any limit that you have to impose? Thank you.
Gracias. ¿Puedo hacer una pregunta? May you translate to me? Yes. Thank you. Gracias por estar aquí. Son súper bienvenidas en la universidad y de verdad es un honor poder haberles escuchado. Tengo dos preguntas muy generales, y es, creo que se incentiva a hacer docencia como desde un ámbito de médico familiar. Es decir, muy unido en una relación personal con las personas, con el estudiante o la estudiante.
There's incentives to establish a very intimate relationship between the teacher and the student.
Como médico familiar, ¿no?
Like a family doctor.
Entonces, ¿cuál es el problema que existe cuando primero hay líderes estatales que tienen la visión de imponer y no liderar de una manera en realidad antidemocrática, y uno tratar de emprender una función de hacer líderes y lideresas en las escuelas cuando son líderes estatales los que van en contravía con ese propósito ético de dar, en este caso, democracia?
For
Y la segunda pregunta es, desde la parte institucional se ha pregonado que el docente de mayor escala tiene que ser un investigador / publicador más. Es decir, una fórmula de que el mayor docente es el que más publica. ¿De qué manera se tiene estas habilidades compasivas si no se tiene un conocimiento de pedagogía con la persona y se ha guiado más a un investigador encerrado a publicar? Entonces, ¿cómo se puede dar esa funcionalidad a la docencia? Muchas gracias.
Any more questions?
Or comments?
Comments?
Karen, do you want to come in first with a couple of comments and then I'll do a round of comments?
Yes.
I'm just going to combine a couple of comments because it's interesting you ask, because I have done some work in states in the United States that are very authoritative. I wouldn't say authoritarian, but where it's expected that policy will be made in the state, at the state level, and that there are regional agencies that ensure that people get trained to do it, and it's a very top-down system. Yet in those states, I've witnessed many school leaders who say, I know what I can do, and I know what I can't do. And you need to negotiate and really develop a set of values and predispositions so that you and your teachers know that there is an area where you have agency, rather than assuming that since it's top-down, you can't. Let me just give you one example. A principal in a very, very disadvantaged, poor school district lived in a state that was very top-down. Everything's regulated by legislation. She was concerned that people were not, community members were not coming together, parents were not coming together and coming to the school because they had different customs and languages, and they were embarrassed because they hadn't done well at school. She found a group that was willing to put a laundry, in the school basement. So the parents could then come and do their laundry with their children after school, and then the teachers could come down and talk to the parents while they were doing their laundry. So nobody cared. No, there's no regulation about governing where the laundry is in their community. So that was a place where they could create a place for building networks among parents and with the school that were very different. So it takes a lot of imagination to do that, but most leaders have that imagination if they remember, where's my area for agency?
Thank you. 2 or 3 things. The first is, so imagine this is a school, okay? And I'm the principal, and this is the gate that they come into school, okay? Whatever the government's saying, I'm the leader, I'm the teacher, you just come in. And I say, buenos días, ¿cómo está? And how I meet and greet you is down to me, the leader, me, the teacher. Nothing to do with the government. And actually, if you talk to children, they say, I want to be seen for who I am. How you meet and greet each child, each member of staff, is nothing to do with the government. I mean, that's part of what Karen's saying on relationships. I think that's a really important thing. The culture, the atmosphere. We know the issues about regulations. I understand some of the complexities here in Chile, but the interrelations, the respect, cannot be constrained by government. Now, I know there are issues about testing, how things are judged. But I will also say, so that's the first thing. The beautiful thing about being a leader in a school is what you can do in relationships. Secondly, the evidence increasingly is that in schools where belonging works, not only is everybody happier and connecting, do you know what? They get really good exam results. The two are not separate. If I can just go back, where's the clicker gone? And show you this wonderful picture. If I go back, it's the, why would that not go back? I want to show this picture because this school, when I see it's the belonging one. Where is here? Okay, look at this school here. Okay, belonging, believing, becoming. You go in the school. This is one of the poorest communities in London. You walk into that school. It's magic. We did that, didn't we? We had the most fantastic day in there. Belonging, believing. That's the strapline as you come in. Everybody's welcome. Here are the young people we interviewed. Here are the students performing. This is the member of staff going, yeah, okay? It's all there. That is in one of the poorest communities with every problem you can imagine and more. And their results are not brilliant, but they are well above what you would expect for a school like that. It's not one thing or the other. And I think the third thing in terms of it's in the wake of COVID, it's how leaders come together and talk about what's going on. And in some ways that may be a challenge to leadership. And certainly, if some of the heads were there that we work with, they would just say, they haven't a clue, some of those at the top, we're the leaders and we're going to speak out. And that actually is kind of really interesting. But I think it's just realizing just how positive all of this is, and that what Karen was saying about an agency, you know, it's one of my favorite concepts. I define agency, a belief that what you do makes a difference, but belief isn't enough. You've also got to have the skills and the opportunity. And I think it's the role of leaders to use their own agency, but to enact the agency of teachers and teachers to be enacting the agency of young people. So I don't dismiss how difficult it is. We've got a lot of difficulties, and I say in England rather than in the UK, but actually schools can make such a phenomenal difference. And I just remember the piece of research that I did some years ago with Carmen Montesinos. I'm sure you have the reference, the one, it's on how, you know, schools doing well in some of really tough circumstances. You know the reference, it's the one I did with Carmen. And actually, because that was what we did here in Chile, and it was just wonderful. So we went into some schools in really poor communities that were doing things differently. And it was all about love. It was all about relationships. There were head teachers who were really connected. There's one head teacher I thought was wonderful, took us on a walk of the community. She knew everybody, and she knew the names of all the dogs in the neighborhood as well. So it is all possible. It's not difficult, but it's not. We can either be compassionate or get good results. Actually, the two go together. And I think it's challenging that notion that somehow compassion is soggy and it's ineffective. It isn't. It's what, you know, what is good for all of us, and it's what gets the results for young people. It's not an either or, and there's loads of evidence to prove that. So I think that's, yeah, that'll do for me. Yes, absolutely.
We have a couple of questions on the YouTube. So Romina says, how do the presenters see the role of research in the production of new relationships between the school and the community? And what's the role of universities in reflecting and working for compassion in relationship with teachers, leaders, and families at the school? Eduardo asks, what differences do you see in terms of economic support to the scholar system in countries that have worked successfully over the pandemic compared to those with, like Chile, which have struggled more?
Yeah,
whoop.
Oh, okay. Do you want to go first then?
Yeah, I was going to
Maybe
say
choose one or two of them. Choose whichever one you want.
Yeah, I'll pick the second one then.
University, yeah.
Because I think the second one and the first one go together. Because there are countries where schools were less disrupted. The less disrupted, that is the fewer closings, or when they were closed, they opened up and they didn't move back and forth. The children did better, and the teachers did better, and the families did better. So, but that's behind us. We can't learn much from that. I do think that we have ways of learning about how different schools or municipalities managed better or worse under conditions where there is policy regulating them, that we can use to help prepare school leaders for the future, because this is a disaster where everybody encountered some aspect of it, but every school will have its unanticipated disaster at some point in its history. You know, the playground will burn down, a beloved teacher will die in the middle of the year. Those things are disasters that have to be managed, and we can learn from this worldwide disaster something about how effective school leaders address those things, where it's not just the children and the teachers, but everybody else who's affected by them.
Yes, some lovely questions. I'm just going to dip briefly into them. Eduardo, in terms of your COVID question, it's a bit complex to just say who's done the best yet, and I'm not sure that helps, as Karen was saying. But I think that there are good things probably everywhere, and it seems to be the good things are about connections with community, about relations, about talking, about connectivity. Oh yeah, not me. Those are the things that really make a big difference. But I think there is a really significant thing about leadership, because I put leadership in this liminal space, not knowing. There is this thing about if you're a leader, you're supposed to know. And actually, leadership for the future is the ability to lead not knowing and lead into all sorts of difficult situations. In Compassionate Leadership for School Belonging, I have 3 case studies, not COVID, about extremes situation. One was a terrorist attack, it was a school I happened to be working in, and what those leaders did. So 3 very specific case studies, and it's all very similar about relationships, connecting and listening. But it's that we focus too much on the nuts and bolts of how to manage budgets. Now, that's important, but actually you can often employ somebody to do the work on the figures if that's not you. But we should be preparing people to say, you are leading. We don't know, any of us. The future is so uncertain. And leadership is about how you lead people into uncertainty, because this is the life for all of us. When you have to look at what's happening in Ukraine, you have to look at climate change. Wow. Leadership is a very different thing. And if you can't lead with that uncertainty, then maybe that's not actually for you. And I think that is really very hard for people, of the certainty, you know, this is the leader and I know what I should be doing. Clearly, universities have a big role in all of this. And I think with research, I think it's really interesting as a researcher to think about what you're researching, how and the why. Why are you researching? Why do you want to do research? Okay, and you might want to research because you quite want the doctorate or be a professor, but actually the why research is, for me, about using research, good research, to inform and change. So a lot of my research is always done in collaboration with other people and with practitioners, so hopefully it will be taken on. So I think everything that's happened is raising those big, big issues. And it's not just about COVID, it is leading in uncertainty in a way that none of us know what's going to happen. And how do you do that is what leadership is about.
Just to add one thing, because I completely agree with what Kathryn has said. One of the things that we know from research, both in education, but also in other kinds of organizations, is that leaders who are able to develop networks of positive relationships within their school also have employees, teachers, nurses, doctors, who are much better at what we call job crafting. That is, managing uncertainties and trying something new to address them on their own. So they're not waiting for somebody to tell them how to do it. They're seeing a need and they're going in and trying it, and then they're talking about it with their colleagues because they're in a network. And so you have what's called, you don't have what's called sticky knowledge. It stays with one person. We have organizations and schools where knowledge travels quickly. The kids have these terrible anxiety issues in class and are acting out. Here's what I tried today, and it really worked. And instead of having it just be in that classroom, all of a sudden other people are trying it too. So you have to have developed that ahead of time before you can manage something as uncertain as a terrorist attack. Because every teacher in a school that has to do that has to deal with the children and the families who are coming back. And that's a unique group, and they have to be able to try to figure that out. There's not a protocol. There's not a set of rules. And so we're developing people who take responsibility, as Kathryn, I think, has pointed out, under difficult conditions. There's massive amounts of empirical evidence that you get that when you do what Kathryn's been talking about.
Yes. So thank you so much. I think we can bring this to a close after more than 1 hour of very interesting presentations and discussion. I would like to thank you all for staying and, getting here and staying. And to those who have been watching the seminar over YouTube, I think there's a lot to continue discussing, lots of questions that we could continue addressing. It's very interesting to compare our reality in Chile with what is happening in the UK and the US. I think that the way our countries have gone through the pandemic and have faced the challenges associated to the pandemic in schools are very different, but they share some similarities. The challenges for teachers and students, they are similar in a way, even though in some countries maybe there were more resources or different strategies to deal with this. So that's really, really interesting. And thank you so much. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Kathryn. Thank you, Karen. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.